Hello everyone and welcome to the first episode of the Nordic Football Podcast in 2022. My name is Steve Wiss and I hope you're all keeping well. For you regular listeners, I know we've been keeping you waiting a bit for this first episode of the new year, but here it is. And for anyone new, welcome on board. It's nice to have you here. So for this first episode of 2022, unfortunately Jonathan Verdugba is not going to be a part of this episode. He's going to be back next week, where we and him will have a good catch up with loads of general overall stuff. But for this edition, it's more we're looking ahead to the Europa Conference League game between Celtic and Bodø Glimt. And to help me do that, I've got a couple of special guests on the show. We start off with Tino from the Celtic Exchange podcast. We felt we needed to get a bit of a Celtic angle into this upcoming match to give you a great insight into the Scottish league leaders. And then after that, we've got a section on Bodø Glimt. I'm joined by analyst Chris Hilliam as we divulge into the Bodø Glimt off-season transfers so far, how they're shaping up ahead of this Europa Conference League tie. We look into some key stats of players that have departed and on also some new guys into the squad, and how we see this the upcoming two-legged tie against Celtic going. So yeah, got two good guests for this episode, starting with the Celtic Exchange, then Chris Hilliam, and it's about an hour long, so hope you all enjoy it, and I'll take it away now with the first guest. I'm delighted to say joining us as a guest on this episode of the Nordic Football Podcast is Tino from the Celtic Exchange podcast. Thanks very much, Tino, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. Hope you're well.
Yeah, doing well, Stephen. Thanks for having us on. Looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, it's Celtic. I mean, the Norway against Scotland has happened a few times in the last 5 years. It seemed like Rosenborg played Celtic every season. Yeah. And now we've got something different on the cards. And Bodø Glimt against Celtic in this Europa Conference League over two legs. So Celtic Football Club, then, Tino, they're what sort of side are you at the moment? Obviously, you've got a new manager this season. Just an overview, whereabouts do you think you are in terms of the type of football we're going to see from Celtic?
Yeah, definitely, Steve. So, I mean, traditionally Celtic have always been associated with playing, good football and playing football the right way, and quite swashbuckling in their style, and quite attacking. And it's that's become really evident again under Ange Postecoglou. We had a really tough season last year. I'm not sure how closely yourself, your listeners might have followed that, but we had a real tough season last year under Neil Lennon. It was time for a change, time to freshen up, and cue Ange Postecoglou in the summer. Again, I don't know how familiar you guys are with his name. We certainly weren't when he was appointed back in June, but we certainly know all about him now. He's brought just a really, really exciting and attacking brand of football. But more importantly, and essentially, he's brought the players to do that as well. He signed something in the region of 12, maybe 14 players between the summer transfer window and the recent winter one. And we've got some real flair in the team. Players like Kyogo up top, Jota on the wing. We've got a centre-half from Spurs, Cameron Carter-Vickers. We've got real talented guys throughout the team, and it's made for a really exciting, first 6 months or so under Ange. So long may that continue.
Yeah, I actually had to check out the pronunciation of him before I recorded this section because normally I have to check out my pronunciations for the Scandinavian players and teams, but yeah, it's certainly a different one. I've noticed in terms of tactically, he's been a flat back four the whole season. Yeah, seems 4-2-3-1, but in recent times, so this is according to Transfermarkt, 4-3-3 sort of attacking system. So it seems very consistent in that way. Is there a certain? It sounds like it's quite an attacking style. Is that true?
Yeah, 100%. And he would tell you that himself. So it's effectively 4-3-3, and basically throughout the spine of the team. So your two centre halves, your deep line centre mid, so your number 6, and your centre forward. They don't move. They're the spine of the team, and they stay fairly rigid in the central area of the park. However, everyone else does move, and then some. He plays with, what he calls inverted fullbacks, and again, some guys will be, quite au fait with, that tactical approach. But our right and left back very quickly form part of the midfield, and when we're on the attack, they help, at times play a pivotal role in that. The front three between the two wingers and the central forward, they've got license to be as creative as they want, and at times they'll interchange in different things. But there's just a lot going on within the system. But absolutely, it's all geared towards attacking football, and now and then we defend, but it's not a huge part of Celtic at this moment in time.
I mean, I'm just looking back at your results, and since the 30th of September, you actually won 23 of your last 26 games in all competitions, and the only defeat in that spell was by Leverkusen. So, you've. I just want to take you back to that Europa League group stage, and you finished on 9 points, just one off the qualification. Now, this Conference League is sort of, it splits opinion about how serious teams take it. And what's the Celtic perspective? Are you excited? Are you looking forward to? It's a competition you can win, or are you a little bit sort of embarrassed to be in it, or what's the general jibe up there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very fair question there. Obviously, it's a brand new competition. Celtic have got a very strong and a very unique relationship with European football. So obviously, we were the first British team to win the European Cup way back in 1967. But we've had some huge nights. Relative recent times, we beat Barcelona back in 2012 in the Champions League. But we've not made the Champions League for the last few seasons now. We did get there a couple of times under Brendan Rodgers, but that's drifted in the last 2 to 3 seasons. So then obviously you step into the Europa, which is deemed the second tier. And now that we've fallen out of that, we've dropped into what I suppose is the third tier of European football. I don't think Celtic and Celtic fans, there's certainly no snobbery. We don't feel we're, above the Conference League or anything like that. And I think we are where we are at this moment in time, as our Bodo Glimt, as our Leicester, as our Roma and various other sides. This is where we're at just now, but I do very much believe that Celtic are a team on the up again, on the ascendancy under Ange. So the winner of the Scottish League, for example, this season, the Scottish Premiership, gets instant access to the Champions League. So there's a real incentive there to, do what we need to do domestically to get back to that top table. But I would say at this moment in time, right now, Celtic probably are a Europa League side, but there's certainly no snobbery. We're looking forward to the challenge of the conference and what that brings.
Do you think your priority is then on the league, really? And is Europe looked at as a distraction, or are you kind of focusing hard on Bodø Glimt as well?
Yeah, it would depend on what fans you ask. So having lost the league last year, a lot of fans would say the domestic stuff is the be-all and end-all this season, reclaiming the Scottish title. I'm a wee bit different. I think that is hugely important, and that is definitely the number one target, of course. But as I say, we've always had an eye on Europe, and definitely wouldn't see it as a distraction. I think a lot of fans are quite excited. We'll be there in the stadium next Thursday for this one, and we're excited to see how far we can go, because taking a look at the teams that are in it as well, Leicester are favourites, and I don't think Leicester are great at this moment in time. For example, Roma are in there, and I know Bodo beat Roma 6-1 at some stage in the Europa League tournament there. I think maybe Mourinho rested some players, but 6-1 is 6-1. So there's certainly nothing to be afraid of. We've played AZ Alkmaar and beat them this year. I suppose the other side of it is Midtjylland have beat us, and they're still in the tournament. So there's interesting teams that make up the remainder of the Conference League, but nobody that Celtic should be afraid of. And maybe Bodo Glimt feel the same. I know they've lost some players there in the window, but maybe they see this as an opportunity of sorts as well.
Now, I need to ask you about some of your players, Tino. And whenever I hear sort of Celtic in the news recently, I kind of hear this sort of Japanese influence at Parkhead. And I know Ange Postecoglou did come from a Japanese club, but you certainly got 2 or 3 exciting Japanese players on board. Talk me through those.
Yeah, so Ange came to us directly from Yokohama F. Marinos, who he had managed for, I think, 2 to 3 seasons out there. He clearly got to know the league during that time, and he's identified some serious talent. So the first player he brought in, or one of his first signings, was Kyogo Furuhashi. Unfortunately, he's injured at this moment in time. He's got a hamstring issue at the moment. He is an absolute superstar. I think he's 26 years of age. He's Celtic's top scorer at the moment. He's got 16 goals all in all, and he's a joy to watch. He won the League Cup final for us back in December. We won 2-1 against Hibs here. And we were 1-0 down, and Kyogo scored a quick-fire double, and it showed him off in all his glory. If you get a chance to check out the goals, it's well worth doing. So he was the first Japanese signing, and he's a fan's favourite instantly. He is top man. But since then, as soon as the winter transfer window opened there not long ago, Ange made a swoop for 3 guys in one. So we signed let me get all my pronunciations right, but Reo Hatate came in, Daisen Maeda, and Yusuke Ideguchi. So 3 different players from different clubs in Japan. Daisen Maeda played for Ange's club at Yokohama Marinos. The other 2 have come from different teams. And Reo Hatate in particular has hit the ground running and then some. He scored 2 goals last week against Rangers. He scored the week before against Hearts. He was man of the match on his debut. And he's been just as exciting as Kyogo has been, although he plays in a deeper position. He's kind of hovers around about that number 8, number 10 position in the midfield. Maeda's taken a wee bit more time to find his feet. He's had a couple of goals, but he's not quite sprung to life in the way that Kyogo done. And Ideguchi, unfortunately, has been injured, looking to get him back this weekend. But they've all had an impact to varying degrees, but Kyogo and Hatate are very, very exciting players.
Yeah, I'm just looking through your squad now. It does seem like you've got a few sort of injuries, some long-term as well. But I mean, for these 2 ties against Bodø Glimt, presuming everyone gets through the weekend and the first leg, who would you say is going to be, you say, your most important, your key 2 or 3 players of these 2 legs?
Yeah, crucial to everything Celtic do at this moment in time is the captain. So Callum McGregor is the captain, and he would traditionally play in that number 6 role. He's Celtic born and bred. He's been at the club since he was something like 8 years of age. He's come right through the academy. He's won, trebles and all sorts of success under Brendan Rodgers and various managers. And he now finds himself, as of this season, captain of the club. He's the real pivot for Celtic. He makes things tick and he sets the tempo, and he's very much the leader in the dressing room. So he's crucial, from a central point of view and a team point of view. Beyond that, one of the key players this season has been Jota, so Portuguese winger, young guy on loan from Benfica. Celtic fans are seriously hopeful we can sign him on a permanent deal, and indications are that's got a good chance of happening. He'll come in off the left-hand side, so he plays up front on the left-hand side. And on the other wing, there's a young winger called Liel Abada. He came in from an Israeli club. He's only 20 years of age, but so far, I think he's had 25 goal contributions for the season. That's made up of 14 goals and 11 assists. And he's been a real revelation as well. So there is threats in all of the front 6 positions for Celtic, from that, pivot from Callum McGregor right up to the centre forward. But lots of variety in what we do and lots of key players there for us.
As a club, you actually have a history of having a few Scandinavian players down the years. Yeah. There's always seems someone, and a guy that caught my eye is Carl Starfelt, who,
that's right.
He came actually through the Brommapojken Youth Academy in near Stockholm there, IFK Göteborg. He signed him 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, it looks like he's been a regular for you this season. How's he been at Celtic Park?
Yeah, Carl Starfelt's been an interesting one. So he came in, his route to Celtic was via Rubin Kazan in Russia, and we signed him in the summer amongst the other kind of 10 players that came in immediately. He's taken a bit of time to settle. He's been the subject actually of much speculation, either through the mainstream media here in Scotland or on a lot of the podcasts, and we're no different. We've had our discussions. Some of us, are huge fans. Some are still a bit unconvinced. However, I think at the moment you find them in a really solid run of form. Celtic have the best defensive record in the league. I think we've conceded 15 from 26 games, I think it is. We've only conceded 2 league goals at home all season, and Carl Starfelt has played a huge part in that.
That's good to hear. As I say, it certainly caught my eye that he'd been there regularly, and we like to keep track on sort of players that move abroad from Norway and Sweden. So, yeah, Celtic Park. Then there's often these reputations in football of they say Anfield on a European night, and you kind of hear that Celtic Park on a European night is a thing. And I don't know even if you've had the chance for that this season, if you've had like crowd restrictions. But I mean, do you think there'll be a good crowd in for the Bodø Glimt game?
Yeah, it won't be far off a full house on Thursday. So that's 60,000 fans. Celtic Park on a European night, or even any sort of midweek night, is something special. Again, I would encourage anyone listening here just now to check out the footage from last Wednesday night's game against Rangers. Celtic winning that 1-3-0. The atmosphere that's generated inside Celtic Park by the fans alone is spectacular. But on a dark night, when the floodlights are on, Celtic have got what is known locally as the disco light. Celtic spent a few £1 million of investment to get this fantastic light show in operation at Celtic Park, and it was mocked at the time because we weren't doing so well on the park, but the lights look great. at this moment in time, we're doing both. But the show, the spectacle at Celtic Park on a dark kind of wintry evening, when the sound system's in full play and the atmosphere's at a bit of a frenzy, it's something to behold. And as I say, catch the footage of that one from last week and you'll see what I'm talking about. But it'll be equally exciting on Thursday. It might be kind of a notch or two down from a Celtic Rangers game, of course, but the atmosphere will be, really something special again as soon as Bodo Glimt come calling on Thursday night.
How cold does it get in sort of Glasgow area? Because the second leg, it could be played in rather extreme conditions, potentially -7, -8 degrees. Do you think your boys will be up for that and embrace it?
Yeah, a lot of the guys will be used to it. I know it can be quite severe there in different parts of Scandinavia. It's pretty, the weather's pretty sharp here at the best of times, and I include summer in that. So yeah, I think the guys will be used to it. And then some. Carl Starfelt that you mentioned, he likes a pair of gloves. He's fond of the gloves, so he might have them on for the away tie. But yeah, there's some adverse weather and then some here in Scotland, so I'm sure that won't be too big a challenge. What I do think might be a challenge, and maybe you can tell me more about it, Steve, is the fact that Bodo play on an artificial surface, if I'm correct with that, and it's quite a small stadium, around about 8,000 there. Is it the Aspamira? Is that the correct pronunciation? So quite a small stadium and a difficult surface to play on. There's a couple of clubs here in the top flight in Scotland that play on the artificial surfaces, and generally speaking, they're not of high quality, and Celtic don't generally play well on that. So that could be a factor come the away leg.
Yeah, I actually prefer the artificial surfaces in Norway. Right. I think the better football gets played on them. And it might be, I don't know whether it's a Scandinavian thing, but there are some pretty good artificial surfaces. Yeah, as compared to what I've seen in other parts of the world. And they have to have it there because they wouldn't be able. The only other way they'd be able to play football is the team in really North Norway called Alta. They actually play indoors. They have a roof on the stadium. But that's the only other way you'd be able to play in like Tromsø and Glimt. So
yeah, it's good to hear that you've said it's a good surface, because some of the artificial stuff here in Scotland, it's very dry. It doesn't make for good football, and it kind of slows down Celtic's kind of free flowing play. At Celtic Park, obviously, it's a huge big grass park, and it's often watered before the games to allow for that slick and fast passing. So hopefully it's a good surface. And the Aspamira, and Celtic can play the way they usually do.
I think it'll be two good games between two sides that like to play good football. The only problem will be if the weather, if it's snowing at the time and the tractor's on standby and stuff. But before you go on, I have to ask you for a prediction, over the first leg and then overall.
Yeah, it'd be hard to call it, in terms of the individual games. What I would say is at the moment, Celtic are in very, very good form. So I need to check. I think we've had 7 games since we came back from the winter break. And we've got 100% record. We're winning games of football consistently at this moment in time, particularly at home at Celtic Park. Traditionally, it has been a fortress. We've let that slip in the last couple of years, but Ange's getting it back to that kind of way. What I do think, my without putting a number on it, my genuine prediction would be that Celtic really go for it in the first leg and look to secure the tie before maybe the unpredictability of an away fixture on a plastic surface. So I think Celtic, and I'm also mindful, showing respect for Bodo, a team that I don't know a great deal about, but as I'd mentioned to yourself before we came on air, I do know they've lost a few key players in that window. One of them two of them have actually came to Hibernian here in Scotland. I think a striker, is it Eric Botham, has gone to Krasnodar. Another fella, is it the captain, Patrick Berg?
Berg left, yeah.
Yeah, so they've lost some key players there, and that might be hard to cope with. They've also not played competitively since their season ended in December. They could all be things that go in our favour, and I think Celtic could catch them on the hop on that first leg on the Thursday night coming.
Yeah, I would say over the 2 legs, I would give an edge to Celtic a little bit. I think it'd be two good games, and I think it's definitely something to look forward to.
Yeah, and that's good to hear from you, Steve, because you know far more about Norwegian football and Nordic football than we do. So encouraged to hear that you think that it might just go in Celtic's favour.
Tell us a little bit more about your podcast, the Celtic Exchange. Where can we find you?
Yeah, definitely. So the Celtic Exchange podcast, so we're at thecelticexchange.com. You'll find us on the usual platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google. We're also on YouTube as well. We've recently started recording what we do, so anyone can check us out there at the Celtic Exchange. We started our podcast at quite a unique time, so we're just a bit more than a year old now. We started back in December 2020. And our very first recording was on the night that Celtic secured the quadruple treble. So, as the words indicate, 4 trebles in a row, which is quite incredible. An interesting time to start a Celtic podcast. And, ultimately we failed last season as a club. We made lots of poor decisions. We also had a few things that, luck-wise didn't go for us. But over the piece, Celtic got it wrong last year, and a lot of fans were pretty despondent and pretty down about it, ourselves included. However, we've made some astute moves in the summer. Ange Postecoglou being the absolute key to everything. He's been a real revelation, a real breath of fresh air. Such a charismatic guy, such an exciting manager. And I think Celtic fans are just very hopeful as to what this team, will bring under Ange. We're seeing a lot of it just now, but by all accounts, Ange's team's really come into their own in the second season under him. So hopefully we've got a lot more to look forward to in the months and years ahead.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like you've done really well in the space of a year. Over 4,000 followers on Twitter. I do like your logo, by the way. That's beautiful, really nice one there. So yeah, do check them out. Any listeners here at Celt Exchange, check out their podcast. I'm sure there'll be some talk about Bodø Glimt on there in forthcoming shows, match reviews that you guys do. So yeah, and thanks once again, Tino from the Celtic Exchange podcast. Really appreciate your time on the Nordic Football Podcast.
You're very welcome, Stephen. Great to chat to you.
Cheers. That was Tino from the Celtic Exchange podcast. Thanks once again for his time. And it was really interesting to get a view on the current Celtic situation. They sound in good form. It sounds like it's going to be a difficult challenge for Bodø Glimt. But now it's time to actually look into the Norwegian outfit. And of course, we've talked about Kjetil Knutsen's side several times on the Nordic Football Podcast. Over the last few years, not an episode goes by without them being mentioned. So I was thinking, how can we sort of have a maybe slightly different angle this time? And my next guest, Chris Hilliam, is an analyst, very strong into his stats and things like that. So basically, I got him on board. I wanted to really find out exactly how much they're going to miss key players like Björkan, Berg, etc., and whether certain replacements can come in and make an immediate difference. And, we're looking at this from a statistical point of view as well. But yeah, my next guest, Chris Hilliam, and we have a really good chat over sort of the Bodø Glimt, what they've been up to the last couple of months, and looking ahead towards this Celtic tie. I'm delighted to be joined by a special guest for this episode of the Nordic Football Podcast, Chris Hilliam, a recruitment analyst, scout with a current focus on Eliteserien and a friend of the podcast. Chris, thanks very much for coming on. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Steve. Hope you are too.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, I've obviously been following you for a fair bit now, and it's been great to see you interacting with myself and the podcast and everything. And it really is a good time to be interested in Scandinavian football as a whole. What sort of got you into Eliteserien in the first place, would you say?
It all started when I started writing for an online publication in the summer of 2020. Now, I've always been interested in analysis and statistics, going back to sort of playing Championship Manager, Football Manager as a kid. And then during the lockdown, reduced working hours, the sort of missus encouraged me to go into it a bit more. And there was a vacancy for a writer on Norwegian football on the publication I wrote for. It was, well, the sort of vacancy was for Scandinavia in general, but that was the time when Bodø Glimt was sort of really into the peak and were catching people's eye around the world. And it was the first couple of reports I did there were on Patrick Berg and on a couple of Glimt's games, and sort of just got into it from there and followed it ever since and grown more and more interested in it and the players and the young talent there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great time to be sort of getting involved really in Norwegian football. And Bodø Glimt, they have caught Europe by storm, really, almost a worldwide sensation when they won the league and backed it with the second league title. This section we are going to be focusing on Bodø Glimt. Obviously, the match against Celtic, doubleheader coming up very soon. It's quite an exciting fixture, and we're just basically going to talk about Bodø Glimt's off-season so far. And we're going to be doing talking a bit statistics and things like that, because that's a strong area for you, Chris. The transfers in and out of the club, and this is nothing new for them. They had to cope with several departures when they won their first league title, and it's the same again here. I'm just going to list through them here. Arik Botheim, he moved to Krasnodar in Russia. 5 million euros was the reported fee there. Patrick Berg to Lens in France, 4.5 million euros. They've lost Frederick Andre Björkan and Marius Luda to Hertha Berlin and Schalke. Those are the most significant departures. There's a few others as well. Runar Hauge, for example, moving to Hibs in Scotland. And Hibs also snapped up Melkerson for nearly €500,000. So 4 departures, 4 significant departures, let's call them. So far, the main arrivals, Bryce Wembangomo from Sandefjord, Rune Espejord from Heerenveen, Jafet Seri Larsen from Brann, and Gotha Herberg Vetti from Sarpsborg. There's, again, also some returning loanees, Isaac Amundsen, who had a year at Tromsø, probably the most notable there. So, ins and outs. I mean, let's talk about the departures first, Chris. Of those 4 names I mentioned, which one of those players do you feel they are going to miss the most?
It'd definitely be a toss-up between Björkan and Berg. I think the one they'll miss the most in terms of being the hardest to replace would probably be Björkan. If we look at some of his stats that he produced last year, defensive duels, he was 75.41% success rate, which was much better than all the other left-backs in the league. It was over 9 progressive passes per 90, again with a very high success rate of 83%. Also ran the ball progressively with 5.6 per 90 and successful attacking actions. He was top of the class for left-backs from that as well. Essentially what those stats show there, I think, is that it was excellent in all thirds of the pitch, so sort of the defensive third with his duels, in the middle third with progressing the ball, and then in the attacking third, he was ranked high for assists as well, and sort of areas of his game that can't be measured quite so well on stats were just his combinations, his exchanges with his midfield players, with Ulrich Saltness, who generally plays as the left-sided central midfielder, and with Pellegrino, especially in the second half of the season, who was generally the left winger or the inside forward as such. So I think he's probably the hardest to replace. They've brought in Bryce Wembangomo, haven't they? He's generally a right-sided fullback. I've not actually seen him play left-back until the friendlies Bodo Glimt have played in the last couple of weeks in Spain. So I'm intrigued by how he fits there and if he is the long-term answer.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. I think Björkan is going to be the hardest to replace, like for like. He's obviously a left-back. Bodo Glimt playing in this 4-3-3 system. They always have done under Kjetil Knudsen. That's not going to change. And I've heard Björkan's role described sometimes as almost an inverted fullback on occasion because of the underlap runs that he has made and things like that. But it's a staggering how many categories he won in terms of statistics compared to other players in his position in the 2021 Eliteserien. So he's obviously a player that's going to be extremely difficult to replace. And I think the general, consensus and presumption was they would just look for someone of a similar ilk, left-footed, who's well suited to that role. But instead, they've kind of gone a bit left field here. No pun intended, that Bryce Wembangomo, who statistically there's a lot of positive things to say about him, especially as involved at a Sandefjord team who, well, they overachieved last season, but it wasn't exactly, he's not exactly in a brilliant side. But significantly for Wembangomo, he's a right back. I've never seen him play outside of that position either, really, sometimes right midfield. There's no doubt he can certainly fill in there if needed, but it seems like they're going to convert him into this left back. And I saw in an interview in January he did with their own website, he said he's anticipating a really hard few months of training, not just in terms of the intensity but also adaptation. And how do you feel about this? They're bringing in basically a right footer at left back, who's not really played much in that role. Can he be converted, do you think? I mean, the coaching is very good at Bodø.
Yeah, I watched Bodo Glimt, as I said. I played a couple of friendlies on a training camp in Spain. He played 75 minutes there against the Danish team, AGF, a couple of days ago. And I was 50-50 on him. There was a lot of good things that he did. I think what helps defensively with him being on that side would be that a lot of wide players now do generally play as inside forwards or inverted wingers. So it would naturally still be defending on his right side if up against that sort of player. His 1v1 defending is always good. He suits Bodo Glimt style player in terms of his physical attributes. He's quite strong, he's quick, he's got good acceleration, which obviously helps in sort of pressing on the halfway line, which he will be asked to do as a fullback. There was a couple of times when it was easy to telegraph what he was going to do with the ball, especially when passing it, because it was very right-footed playing from that left side. So it was always opening his body up, and it was obvious where he was going to pass to. The pass was usually going to the left-hand side in centre-back or into Elias Hagen, who was playing as the deepest line midfield player. So I just wasn't too sure. Obviously, as far as I can tell, he's never played there for Sandefjord. So having played 45 minutes there against Dynamo Kiev in a friendly, and then the 75 minutes there is the only time he's played there. So you would expect him to improve. He carried the ball well from that area. Again, it was sort of all inward rather than down the line. But as you mentioned, Steve, Bjørkan was generally described as an inverted fullback, wing-back as well, which you can obviously see would suit playing a right foot at left back. The slight issue I've got with that is if he's playing, you'd expect mostly with Pellegrino as the left winger, who he generally does play as an inside forward. He's a right-footed player, and you're just a bit worried if Wembanyama is constantly underlapping rather than offering that overlap option. It can sometimes just end up with Pellegrino sort of running into a bit of a crowded area rather than Wembanyama having the opportunity to go on the overlap and drag a player out of the way. I think in the sort of the second half from half time, so half an hour when Wembanyama was still on the pitch, he played there with Solbakken, went onto the left side, who is a left-footed player, and I think that as a partnership worked a little bit better than Wembanyama then did have sort of the option either to just hang back and let Solbakken stay one-on-one, or to give that underlapping option just to draw defenders away. So interesting to see how that pans out, but as you say, the coaching's very good. They obviously see something in him that suggests he can play that role. If we just have a look at his stats, they're quite comparative to Bjørkan's, in fairness. Contested more defensive duels than Bjørkan, which you'd expect because he was playing for a team who does more defending in Sandefjord. Success rate, not as good, but for a fullback, Bjørkan's defensive success rate was out of this world, really. Progressive passes, Wembanyama actually more. Again, nowhere near the success rate, but you could argue that's tactical and the strength of the players at Sandefjord not giving him quite so good options as he's likely to receive at Bodo Glimt. He ran the ball progressively at a similar level, and remarkably for a team sort of towards the bottom of the league in Sandefjord, he returned 10.39 successful attacking actions per 90, which is almost double actually what Bjørkan produced. And that sort of them stats there, he was top amongst elite Syrian right backs for the progressive runs and for the successful attacking actions. So you can certainly see how he fits. I think in terms of technical and physical, it definitely fits well. The argument will probably be whether he fits it tactically.
Yeah, I was looking at some of these stats, and certainly like offensive duels, dribbles, things like that. He's only second to Bjørkan last season, which is quite impressive in the Sandefjord side. So I think he does stack up statistically. I can see certainly in that respect why they've decided to go for him, and I suppose he does offer excellent cover at right back as well, should anything happen to Samsted. I mean, I am worried for them if Wembanyama goes down. You know, he's coming off a season and played with injury, actually. It might just be, he's fully recovered from that now. But I really am intrigued whether long term they see him sort of, is he going to be like the right back starter long term? and they're going to eventually bring in more of a natural left back, or they're just literally putting all their eggs into this left back basket with Wembanyama. I think time will tell, but there's still, I think there's room to be optimistic, isn't there, for Glimt fans for Wembanyama for sure.
Yeah, it was largely positive what I've seen from him in those friendlies. Just to add to your point about his injury record, it did look to be sort of rather legless. The last sort of bit I watched him do was a spot of defending on the touchline, and he was struggling. He sort of did well in the first phase and then was struggling to catch up for the second phase. Obviously, Bodo Glimt play at an incredibly high intensity, so as well as the tactical coaching he'll need to play in that position, he's probably going to need to come on physically as well if he is to play there week in, week out. And as you mentioned, Steve, the options at left back, apart from him, look rather thin unless they plan on bringing somebody in. And they got him in rather early. It was only a couple of days into the transfer window, so they clearly highlighted him rather early on and brought him in as soon as they could. So I think they've got full faith in him playing that role. And if Geto Knutsen and the team there have got full faith in him, then I'm certainly on board with that myself.
Let's stay in defence, because another departure is Marius Luda to Schalke. Again, they on a free transfer. Sadly, they didn't get any money for him here. And I feel like this is a transfer that's gone under the radar. Really, not many people have been talking about it. But Bodø Glimt did have the best defence in Norway by quite some margin last season. And, Luda's been fairly solid for them. I think he had a better 2020 than 2021, I will be honest. But this is a guy that was, he had a period in the first half of last season where he went down injured a bit, but he was back fully strongly for the second part of the season during the unbeaten run. And I felt that a lot of the matches that he missed was when results started to go a little bit pear-shaped last season. So, although it must be mentioned that Breda Mu also did miss time around that as well, so it wasn't ideal. Now, Luda, in terms of, basically they're looking for another centre-back. They're looking for another centre-back to partner Breda Mu, and, internally they've got the likes of Marius Herbratton, but the general consensus is he is really just a great bench option, but as a regular starter, maybe not. They've got some youngsters like Sigurd Kvia, returning Lerny and Munson, and they've recently signed Jafet Seri Larsen from Brann, and it looks like he probably will be the guy that slots in. Is losing Luda a big problem for Glimt, or is this one they can solve fairly easily?
He's a guy, I agree with you. I think he was better in 2020, but yeah, there was the results did dip when he was out last year, which probably shows his influence on the team. I think he's one of these where, and Bodo Glimt have got used to it over the past couple of years, where there's the potential to just seamlessly replace him for as good as he has been. There are plenty of options there. Højbjerg generally plays as many games as Luda and Mo have, just for whenever they're missing through suspension injury, he's always there, and he is that solid third centre-back option where if one of them's out, you can rely on him to play. Amundsen, to the eye, I was quite impressed from what I saw of him at Tromsø last year, but looking at the data side, and you've got to sort of look at Tromsø playing a different style to Bodo Glimt, but what he did in terms of his ball progression was just not at the level of the Bodo Glimt centre-backs. If you look at the stats, they're absolutely crazy for Luda, Mo and Højbjerg in the way they progress the ball, which is definitely a style point, but also you have to be comfortable doing it and you have to be accurate at doing it as well. Amundsen didn't really strike me as offering that. I think Jafet Seri Larsen's a smart signing. Didn't play sort of enough minutes for Brann last year to get a really good sample size of his statistics, but from what I've seen of him and going purely off the eye, I think he's got the potential to be a really good young centre-back. I think he's comfortable carrying the ball, he's comfortable passing the ball. He reads the game well defensively. He's probably similar-ish to Luda, and I think he will be the first choice to partner Mu. And then, as I say, we've got Højbjerg, and then Sigurd Kvile was fairly impressive in the small minutes he got last season as well. So I do think Luda's probably one of them who can be seamlessly replaced without wanting to understate the influence he's had on the team the last couple of years.
Yeah, I feel like that Jaffet Seri-Larsson will be the guy who comes in and takes the second centre-back position. Again, someone else who had some injuries last season, so it might be another one where it just takes him a little bit of time to get into the fitness side of things at Bodø Glimt. Regarding Amundsen, what concerned me was in the back end of last season when Tromsø had a really good run of results, he wasn't in the team. They put him to the bench for like most of the last 10 games, and for me, that sends a little bit of warning signs. It might not just be because of that. It might be because they're thinking of the future. They want, and also because, let's be honest, he was a Bodø Glimt guy on loan at Tromsø, which, I felt that was a little bit of a weird one anyway. Two massive rivals who hate each other, taking someone there. So look, I don't know exactly why, but it certainly caught my eye that Amundsen was bench rested for when they had that really good run when they were better defensively. So, but I'm sure he's come on from that season on loan anyway. And it's going to be. I don't think it's a huge loss, Luda. I think it's one of those where they probably at the start of the season might be more vulnerable. Celtic, for example, I'm sure they'll be looking at them defensively and thinking, yeah, let's try and take advantage while they're getting new players in at the back. But by the start of the Elite Serie and the first few rounds, you would think they've got things settled down, right, Chris?
Yeah, I would think so. I think just pointing on the Celtic match, I imagine they'd probably go with Højbjerg and Mu, just for the familiarity aspect in such a tough game and a big game for the club as well. And I'd imagine they'd go that way, but Knutsen's not necessarily the type to do what's expected. He's an incredibly good coach, and you'd have to trust him. And if he decides that Jaffet Seri-Larsson or Amundsen or even Kvili are the right choice, then you'd absolutely not argue with him.
Now, if you talk about Bodø Glimt in the last 2 years, the one player who always gets mentioned is Patrick Berg. Now, he's been finally sold this winter to Lens in France, €4.5 million reportedly. I mean, first of all, what are your thoughts on that transfer fee? Do you think Lens have got themselves a really good bargain there, or is it a fair price?
Probably a fair price in terms of the fees you get coming out of the Elite Serie. And I think you mentioned Botheim's transfer fee at the start of the show. And that's probably too high, given he's only done it for one season. There's that sort of the Roma factor from when he got the goals in that 6-1 game. I've probably a fair price for Berg. I mean, if he produced what he had for Bodø Glimt for Lens, you'd probably be looking at 10 million, wouldn't you? It'd be at least double just from the market you're signing him from. But I don't think you could have expected them to get any more money from that, even though in general terms it probably is worth more than that.
Yeah, I think it was I get why they're getting him. Completely different system there at Lens, by the way. For those who are interested, 3-4-3 they play. So he made his first his starting debut for them against Lorient the weekend when they lost. So it'd be interesting to follow his progress at Lens. But in terms of Bodø Glimt, now this is a player that I looked at his numbers in the last couple of years, and they don't always state how important he is to the team. I think I agree with you that Berg probably is the position that is going to be difficult to replace, but it is worth noting, for example, they went to Rome and got a 2-2 draw without him. And it seems like Elias Hagen is going to be the lad to replace him. And we saw signs in the last 2 years that when he did step into the team, he was ready. This is someone that's been within their own setup for quite a long time now. And, it's almost like next man off the conveyor belt with Hagen. I guess look, you can't just immediately fill Patrick Berg's boots, but do you think he can go at least some way to doing it, and by the end of the season become quite one of the strong players in the entire league?
I think so, yeah. I certainly hope so. I like him whenever I've seen him. I like him. He's taller than Berg, which obviously helps in the aerial duel sort of aspect of his game. I think in terms of the other numbers he's put forward in his obviously reasonably limited minutes, because Berg did generally play whenever available. But the numbers are comparable. I think you mentioned about Berg's numbers. He plays in a position where it's more to the eye when you see how good he is than the numbers he picks up. But he still posted some strong numbers last season. He was top for defensive duels won amongst sort of other central midfield, deep lying midfield players in the league. And it was top for pass volume and for the accuracy of long passes, which didn't necessarily play a lot of, but when the opportunity was there, he was accurate with them. 78% success rate for his progressive and his forward passing. And it was essentially in the top 30%, mostly 20 and 15% for every measurable stat amongst sort of players in his area. And if we look at Hagen, he was comparable in them defensive duels, so not far off. And as I said, Berg was top for them. His passing accuracy is actually slightly better than Berg's, albeit from a less sample size. So it's possible once he starts playing week in, week out, that could go down slightly. However, from the games he's played so far, there was a comparable passing volume. To the eye, he looks very good technically and very good tactically. I think, as you say, he's the next man off the conveyor belt, almost as if he's been groomed to replace Berg, knowing that, I mean, you'd have expected Berg might have been gone this time last year. They've managed to hold on to him for another year, and that's given Hagen sort of another year just to learn the role. I think he's seemingly got all the tools to fill what are admittedly big shoes. I think, by the end of the season, it could be a case of they're not necessarily missing Berg all that much, and Hagen's proving he can do the job just as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think he's definitely one to watch, to keep an eye on this season. A lot of people will never have heard of him. Elias Kristoffersen, Hagen, but basically almost a like-for-like Patrick Berg replacement. So, but again, early in the season, it might be the time he's a little bit more vulnerable. But I've seen this guy step up in big games before. Olympico is an example. I think he had a really good game against Molde a year or two ago as well. He certainly is very promising for that area. And they do have midfield depth, the Bodø Glimt, not necessarily in terms of that particular role, but you've got likes of Konradsen, new signing from Sarpsborg, Vetti, of course, Ulrik Saltners can play that type of role as well. It's still a very strong area, isn't it? This Bodø Glimt midfield trio, where you've got sort of this more of a holding midfielder in Hagen's role, and then two midfield runners alongside him. It's a really the power horse of their engine.
Yeah, definitely. I think Sondre Fett was the one you failed to mention there, and he'd generally be the right-sided one, or Vetlesen. Yeah, the tactically, every single part knows what they're doing, and Hagen will have learned that. And if they are a little bit vulnerable, it'll just be him not being used to playing week in, week out. I think in terms of him knowing what's required technically and tactically, he'll have that absolutely spot on. We sort of sometimes perhaps lazily label it as a holding midfield player, but the way Bodø Glimt play and sort of didn't necessarily press quite so high and quite so intensely last year as they did the previous year, almost as if they're so well coached to learn how to play what was described as kamikaze football. They learned how to play with a bit more control last year. Obviously, having lost so many goals, Gettle Knutson almost asked them to play the same way, but with a little bit more control, which can be seen in the fact that they scored less goals but conceded less last season as well. But the starting position is high from Hagen, sort of out of possession, and in possession he won't necessarily drop between the centre-backs. He'll sit deeper than the midfield players, almost along the plane of the full-backs, and collect there. And essentially what he will do, and what Berg did, is he just creates triangles all around the pitch. So there'll be triangles with centre-backs and full-back, then with full-back and the left-sided or the right-sided of the two central midfield players ahead of him. And again, further up the pitch, it'll be doing likewise with the midfield or the strikers with the wide players. So, and then when they do lose the ball, he will sort of stay almost on the line of the final third, so sort of 30 yards out, and he'll look to dictate the press from there, and then sit back and look to drop deeper out of possession if the opposition retains it a bit longer.
Yeah, I'm honestly quite confident about Bodø Glimt in the midfield areas this year. I think it's probably their strongest department in terms of quality and also depth. And I don't really. Berg obviously is Patrick Berg, but I feel like they can certainly cope without him and do fine in that area. But they've lost their starting left back, they've lost the starting centre back, starting D mid, and the final key position they've lost is their starting striker, top scorer, Arik Botheim. He scored 15 goals in the league last season. Now, I remember going into at the start of 2021, Kasper Juncker, 27 goal man Kasper Juncker had departed the club, and there was a lot of concern saying, Botheim coming in, that's a bit of a weird signing, because he had never really historically had, I don't think he'd scored more than 3 goals in a season before. And I think he's another one. He had a few injury concerns heading into the club, but he's actually started every single Eliteserien match, scored 15 goals there, contributed in the cups and the Europa League as well. Now, you often see some tweets go around, don't you, saying that if I was the striker for Bodø Glimt, I would back myself to score, a dozen goals a season. Is it really as simple as that? Do you think? I mean, Botheim is €5 million is fantastic business. I think I don't think he's worth much more than 1 or 2. But is it really as simple as that? If you literally stick anyone up front for them, will score goals, or will Botheim be missed more than people expect?
I think of the 4 major departures, who probably will turn out to be the easiest to replace. I think putting it as simply as stick either me or yourself up front, we probably won't get 15 goals in the league. But they will create chances for whoever's playing up there. I think the more important aspect of playing up there, because any striker who can finish, which we do have, Victor Boniface, who's been plagued by injuries, the young player of Bodø Glimt, who sort of looked like he was going to be a big star at the end of the 2020 season when he's coming off the bench and scoring goals, and you thought they'd possibly had the replacement for Juncker there, and then was plagued by injury again last season. He's started up front in the 2 friendlies so far, and he got a goal against Dynamo Kiev. And with Esbjerg, who, despite not scoring for Tromsø last year, I've had a look through his numbers sort of in 2018 and 2019 when he played in Eliteserien before he moved to Heerenveen, and he was finishing at sort of on his XG, so he's clearly a capable finisher, and he is going to get the chances. So you would fancy that he's capable of matching Botheim's sort of goal-scoring record. I think if we look at some of Botheim's numbers, quite a few of these are more style points, just the way Bodø Glimt asked their striker to play and the strength of the team comparative to those in the rest of the division. He received over 12 passes per 90 and 4.02 touches in the box per 90. So he's getting the ball in good areas. They're asking him to receive, sometimes to hold up. They're a very vertical side, Bodø Glimt. They will look to get the ball forward as quick as they can without being long. So I think off the ball is probably more important, sort of competing off the ball. Botheim only won 30% of his offensive duels. I think Esbjerg's a bit of a warrior up there. You'd expect him to be winning more than that. And tactically is probably the most important in terms of with the ball and without the ball. With the ball, it'll be getting into those right areas, knowing when to link up, when to drop deep, when to just be that sort of target man poacher type striker, and off the ball, obviously leading the press. As I mentioned earlier, they didn't press quite so intensely as they did in the 2020 season, and certainly if we're looking forward to the Celtic game, I imagine it's not going to be quite as intense as we've seen them at the best or at the most intense. I think once he gets used to that, it can certainly prove an adequate, if not better, replacement for Botheim. He's a good age as well, Esbjerg. He seems a bit old. He's been around a while, and it arguably looks a little bit older, but he's still 25, so that's a really good age for a Bodø Glimt player. And yeah, I don't think it's going to matter much. If Boniface stays fit and they've got Esbjerg as well, they've got more than enough to adequately replace Botheim as far as I'm concerned there.
Do you think they're bringing in Esbjerg here? Boniface is obviously coming back from injury. We've got to mention Esbjerg's injury past, which is not great. I have to say, I've always rated Runar Esbjerg, by the way. I've said this several times over the years on the Nordic Football Podcast. Great finisher. got a bit of class about him. He's certainly got more class about him than Botheim, and you could probably more than Juncker as well. Actually, you just tell by someone when you watch them that they've got that bit of quality, but he can't stay fit. He never has been able to stay fit. The Bodø Glimt setup is obviously they get their players really well conditioned. Hopefully, they can get on top of them. But do you feel like they've kind of factored that in by having options this year? You know, Boniface or Espior, or even someone like Pellegrino, Nordas, even. You know, so what do you think is sort of they've got these sort of plans in place in case things go wrong?
Possibly, yeah. I suppose you're just hoping for one of Espior or Boniface to be fit at any one time. The option to play Pellegrino up there intrigues me, just from sort of what I was touching on with when Bangamo playing there as the inverted man, and whether that sort of takes some of the space away on the inside for Pellegrino. If he plays up front and Solback and plays on the left hand side, that perhaps sort of improves what Bangamo can add to the team as well. I feel that's probably the last resort, and they will be banking on at least one of Boniface and Espior being fit any one time. Nordas, not played an awful lot of minutes. I can't say I've seen enough of him to pass judgment on him. Imagine the club sort of feel quite strongly on him as well to still have him around. They probably feel like they have enough. He'll be put to the test. Boniface it's 2 ACLs, isn't it, that he's had in? I mean, it's seemingly still sort of has the ability, but can you ever truly get over something like that? It's the niggles that come, not necessarily in the knee, but after that, isn't it? When you sort of your body's not as strong as it once were, and it's a shame because he's an incredibly talented prospect. If he can stay fit this season, he'd have an argument to be the first choice centre forward.
I think they've got to watch his minutes, haven't they? Because you're right about, do you ever truly recover from that? I mean, I know there's a player at FC Metz in France, Matteo Udol, 25 years old now, and he's done his ACL in 4 times now, and he got injured again this season from it. It's a shame because he's a really talented player, but I think they've really got to manage his minutes. But he's still young, I suppose. So it is easier to recover them. I want to ask you a question about the Espior signing. Forgetting the injuries here, he's moving from effectively Heerenveen, but his history is at Tromsø. He grew up there in the academy. His heart's in that city. These two sides are massive rivals. It's a little bit of a controversial signing. It's almost a bit like, let's put it in sort of more local terms around our neck of the woods. It's like Calvin Phillips moving to Man United. And do you feel this sort of thing? It can work, can't it? But at the same time, if he starts to produce performances that are a little bit below expectations, the fans might get on his back a bit.
Possibly, yeah. I know that the Tromsø fans that I've sort of seen on social media are pretty distraught about it. Some are upset, some are angry, some are a combination of the two. I'm not sure on whether they would get on his back a little bit. I think, as with Boniface, they might just have to manage his minutes, and it might be easy enough to take him out of the firing line if it doesn't start well for him and play Boniface if they both stay fit. Without knowing too many Bodø Glimt fans well, or I wouldn't necessarily be able to judge how quickly they would turn on a player like that. I think to use your analogy, obviously Alan Smith did move from Leeds to Man United, and he started well there until he got the terrible injury, and they loved him. And I think you've sort of got that feeling where if he starts well, they'll almost love him even more because of where he's come from. So he could work the other way. He could sort of get that real boost, a sort of giving the Bodø Glimt fans a little chance to boast, sort of, we're bigger than you, we're better than you, sort of to Tromsø, and whether that might have a positive impact on him, I don't know.
Yeah, these are difficult times for Tromsø fans, I must say. It really is hard for them, but that's the situation they're in at the moment. So let's just talk briefly about this Celtic matchup coming, because it's important that Bodø Glimt, let's be honest, the results that have really opened people's eyes are against Roma. They beat Roma 6-1, and they drew 2-2 against them in Rome. And I think it would be a great story if they were to have some sort of decent run in this competition and get even more eyes on them. There's going to be plenty of eyes on this Celtic tie, and I think, I'll be honest, my personal prediction, if this had happened, say in December last year, I think Bodø Glimt would have got through Celtic over 2 legs. But it comes at an awkward time of the year. I haven't seen much of Celtic recently, but from what I've heard, that they are playing a lot better football than they were doing, and this is going to be an intriguing tie. It looks like they're a flat back four under their new manager as well. So intriguing sort of matchup. What sort of games are you expecting over the 2 legs, do you think, Chris?
I'm looking forward to it. I think it's 2 very well coached sides. I've not watched a great deal of Celtic. I did watch the first half of the Old Firm and then a little bit of the second half, and sort of having seen bits and read bits, it's 2 very well coached sides. They play quite a similar fashion. They're both quite vertical. They're direct without being long. They'll look to get the ball forward. They attack at pace. They're quick, direct. They're energetic in transition. I think both teams dominate possession, not necessarily because that's how they want to control the game, but because of the strength of the team. Opposition will just let them have the ball, but it's not possession for possession's sake. They are always looking to do something with it. It's an intriguing tie. I think if Bodo Glimt can keep it to perhaps a 1-goal deficit in the first leg and take it back to, I don't think any team's going to relish a trip to North Norway, especially at this time of year. So just a 1-goal deficit, I think, gives them a chance. The way Celtic attack with such pace, certainly in the match against Rangers, they looked like they were going to score every time they went forward for periods in the first half. If they do score early and pick up that second, it could end up being a long tie for Bodo Glimt. We know Bodo Glimt have got the capability to do that themselves. I'm intrigued as to how it's going to pan out, whether Bodo Glimt will let Celtic dominate possession. They very rarely change from the style. They didn't when they played Milan in 2020. They didn't when they played Roma. Just with the players they've lost, I'd be intrigued. Just not necessarily be passive, but just show a bit of respect, if that's the right way of saying it. I'm certainly expecting an intriguing contest. It could be one where the managers really enjoy it, win, lose or draw, just the tactical battle, and if either of them can find an edge, that sort of turns it their way, with it being roughly similar styles.
I'm going to have to ask you for a prediction over the 2 legs. Who's going to make it through?
I think Celtic go through by a goal.
Oof, by a goal.
Yeah, I think they probably win the first leg by 2, and Bodo Glimt come back with just a 1 sort of goal margin victory in the second leg and just fall short.
Yeah, I would lean Celtic myself at this point in time. I lean them slightly as well, but it's all about that first leg. I think they've got to stay within touching distance of Celtic at Celtic Park there. But well, anyway, Chris, well, thanks very much for coming on the podcast. We'll have you again on at some point during the season for sure, if you're interested, and we can talk about stats and stuff. And I think we were talking once potentially about even some of the newly promoted sides and some players that are coming into the league that people might not know a lot about. So that's something maybe to look forward to. But really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it, and I'd love to come on again if that's a possibility.
And where can we follow you, Chris? Where can people find you?
I'm at Footy and Ali Chris, and Chris is with a K, sort of the Scandinavian spelling, funnily enough.
Yeah, I'll at Footy and Ali Chris. We will. I'll make sure I put that down on the episode description for you to follow on Twitter there. So yeah, do give this account a follow. It's some really good stuff on Chris's account. If you're into your graphs and your stats and things like that, and the occasional thing on Leeds United, then that's a great account to follow. So thanks once again, Chris Hilliam on the Nordic Football Podcast, and I'm sure we'll catch up with you again at some point during the season. Chris, take care.
Cheers, Steve. Thank you.
Okay, well that rounds things off for this episode. We certainly look forward to that first leg on Thursday at Celtic Park, and next week I'll be back with my good pal Jonathan Fadugba. I'm sure we'll dissect that match from Scotland and talk about a bunch of other stuff. There's been several transfers over the the winter window, and the start of the Eliteserien and Allsvenskan is 6 weeks away now, something like that. So plenty to talk about. Remember to follow the podcast on Twitter if you're not already, at Nordic Footpod. You can follow myself at Meatman Soccer, Jonathan as well at JF Football, and do remember to check out the guests that we had on the show, Chris Hilliam and the Celtic Exchange. But that's it for this one. Stay safe, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you around again very soon. Goodbye.